have mercy. Look at how the time goes.
And welcome, listeners, to the Coming Home podcast with John Allen. I am your host, John Allen, and today I will be having a discussion with Mr. John Eivind Melbye. He is a police superintendent here in Norway, and he is a supervisor of detectives. Hello, John.
Hi, John. How are you?
You know, I'm doing great. As I was telling you before we went live, I've been looking forward to this for the last couple of days. As you know, I have a background as a police officer in the States. So anytime I get to converse with one of my brothers here in Norway, it's just, I like it. It's just, it's fun.
Yeah, I'm thinking the same thing. It's going to be really interesting talking to someone with experience from another country doing the same thing.
You know, and it is truly a brotherhood. We're going to talk about this later. There are some drastic differences between police work in America and police work in Norway, and we'll talk about that. But in spite of those differences, it is a brotherhood.
No doubt.
I can remember when I was at the Police Training Institute at the University of Illinois. That's where I studied and got my accreditation as a police officer. We had 2 exchange students from Russia.
Really?
And that was fascinating. 2 exchange students from Russia studying under our police program. It was very interesting.
Wow.
But you know, and this was 20 some years ago. So this was when, you know, the Cold War was over, but it was still a little chilly in the air.
Right. And you could still find some brotherhood even
in spite of that. Well, I will say this, the first couple of days of that school, nobody dared to talk to them, and they didn't try to talk to us. It was just kind of, they were there, and it was this strange cloud of mystery in there. But little by little, after a few days, they loosened up, we loosened up, and yes, the brotherhood came out. I mean, it is a brotherhood over international borders. Absolutely.
That is very interesting. I remember I was actually celebrating you could actually call it a bachelor party, but I went to Las Vegas with a couple of my friends in advance of my wedding. And that's the first time I traveled abroad and actually met other police officers in another country. And I remember distinctively that meeting, and we had long conversations with a patrol with 2 officers that came to actually handle a situation that was happening outside of the bar where we were.
Okay.
And that's why I've been looking forward to this, because we had 20 minutes of talking maybe, and now maybe we'll have some more. And, I tried briefly to get some information from them about how they did their job, but I mean, there was some beer involved. That's not the case today. So we'll have a more interesting discussion.
Yeah, all I have is a glass of water here, so
that sounds good.
I'll be speaking clearly.
I'm actually in my office right now, so no alcohol here either.
Do you? You're actually at the police station now.
Yeah, just for some peace and quiet.
Okay. Yeah. Wow.
For this conversation.
Check out John Eivind taking this episode serious. Thank you.
I'm not taking this lightly.
No, I appreciate that. It's I don't know how to put it into words how much I've been looking forward to this. When I first came here to Norway, and I literally came straight from the job. I mean, I was working right up until I moved here. My wife came here a little bit before me. My wife is Norwegian. She came here a little bit before me. I worked up until just a couple of days before I actually got on the plane and came here. And my last day on the job, there was a robbery locally. A guy had robbed a grocery store. And just by chance, my partner and I, as we were driving down the road, we see the guy running across the road.
Oh, that's fun.
So it was a foot chase, and the guy was armed, it turned out. And it was, so that was my last day on the job. That's how I left the job.
Oh, that's a good way of finishing.
Where do you see yourself? Now you've come quite a ways. You've been an officer for 9 years now.
Yeah.
And you're already in a supervisory position after 9 years. That happened pretty quick. Where do you see yourself in another 9 or 10 years? In other words, what are the opportunities for you to advance within the police system here in Norway?
Well, it's an interesting question, and it's very correct the way you said it because I am. It is very early for me to have this job. This did you call it a
supervisor of detectives? And for my little knowledge that I know about the police system, that is, you are to be commended because you have risen to that level fairly quickly. So congratulations on that.
Yeah. Well, thank you. I'm 34 years old, and that is, and as you said, I worked for 9 years, and not many get that job at such a young age. But in my interview, that was one of my main points, that I see myself in this job in 10 years.
Okay.
Because this is actually my dream job. This is what I've always wanted to do.
Wow.
I mean, at least since I joined the police. So
you've had that focus, you've had that goal and that focus in mind from day one.
Yeah, but I always thought that it was going to happen later on. I always thought that I would have to have 20 years on my back before I would even be able to have this opportunity. And to be fair, I was slightly lucky with the timing because there was a job opening and a more experienced individual than myself applied and got the job, but then because this was a woman, she pulled out of the job for personal reasons, and then I went at it, and we were just 3 people applying for it. And as I said, one of my main arguments for them to choose me was that I'm young, that this is a job that is so important that if you choose a police officer that is going to retire just a few years after they've been hired, then you won't get the development in the fairly newly appointed job, because this job was created just a year ago. For this purpose.
I think that's fascinating. That is very interesting and very good thinking on your part to present it to them that way. That, take me, I'm young, I will be here for years to come. There can be some continuity in this division of our police department. What a great way of looking at it.
Yeah, that was basically word for word, just in Norwegian, what I said.
Hey, see, there's that brotherhood. We think alike.
Yep. No doubt. No, so it's a newly the organization in the entire of Norway, the entire country, has changed over the last few years, as you may have noticed, or read about. So our police district just got 10 times as big,
as if it wasn't big enough already.
Exactly, especially out here in the rural countries where the distances between. I mean, there are not a lot of police officer per capita here.
Yeah. Do you have any numbers on that? How many police per capita in your district?
Well, we're low. If you look at Oslo and probably Drammen, where you are, Oslo is the highest with more than probably 3 officers per 1,000 inhabitants.
Okay.
We're just above 1 here, I think.
Wow.
And the government's outspoken goal is for the entire country to be 2 officers per 1,000 people.
I just don't see that.
They look at the average. So they're satisfied with Oslo being higher, us being lower. When
I guess if you're just looking for statistics, that's a good way of looking at it. But in practical terms, and I know from living most of my time in Norway, we've lived up north, first in Finnmark, West Finnmark, and then in Nord-Troms. So we felt it, and my wife and I.
Yeah, right. What were you going to do if something happened?
Exactly. So we kind of always had this feeling of, one thing my friends back home in America asked me, they would say, "Oh, I bet you feel so much safer in Norway than you did in the Chicago area." And my answer to that is no. I felt safer back in the Chicago area because if something happened, there's tons of police protection to be had.
The police is literally 2 minutes away, probably.
Literally 2 minutes away. My wife was the unfortunate victim of a crime, and she had to call the police. I was actually working when this thing happened to her, and she called us, and it literally 60 seconds later, there were 2 police vehicles, and about a minute after that, there were about 20 more, because if an officer's wife is having trouble, everybody comes.
And that's how it should be.
But I can remember living up north in Nordtroms. We lived in U.S.A. And I can remember several times there were some rather serious things that happened, and the nearest available patrol car was in Skibotn, which was about 2.5, 3 hours away, if the weather was good. If the weather was good.
Right.
So
what are you going to do? You have to, and that's where you have to start thinking about at what point. I mean, obviously the crime rates are not especially high in the world.
That's true.
But then again, as we will probably talk about later, those statistics are also changing, and it gets worse in some areas and better in some areas. But at what point will people living in those areas where you describe, at what point will they think, well, we have no police, we have to manage by ourselves, and we have to make up our own rules because they're not going to come help us?
Yeah, I know they are doing that, or were doing that to a certain degree. When we lived up north, there were so many things that happened, and as a police officer myself, I was thinking, we need some police intervention here. But people just, they knew the police were a couple hours away if they were lucky, so they just handled it themselves.
Exactly.
But you said something about crime statistics in the rural areas. Let me play the devil's advocate here. What if I were to say to you that I believe that there is a significant amount of crime in the rural areas, but it is not coming to light because of the low police presence, that there are things going on, whether it's drugs or whatever it may be, but a lot of that crime goes undiscovered by the police.
I'd say no doubt. There's we call them dark numbers.
Yeah.
When we talk about this, and it's more of a concern and more of a debate, and they speak more about it now in the ranks where, well, amongst the people that are deciding how Norway is going to be run, and how the police in Norway are going to be run, than before. But I mean, if you look at, you mentioned drugs, and I've had before I got into this job, my main area was narcotics. Yeah. Along with working with youth. And,
wow, we are literally in a brotherhood, because that was my main focus as well. Gangs and narcotics, and then unfortunately a lot of youth are involved in those things back in the Chicago area. So yeah, that's what I worked with as well.
I reacted to that when we spoke on the phone yesterday. That you.
Oh yeah, did I tell you that? Okay, yeah.
Yeah, you did tell me that. So you basically described your career as mine. But
well, maybe in 15 years you'll be a tired black guy, shaved head, doing a podcast.
Tired shaved head, maybe.
Yeah, the undiscovered crime, the unrealized crime.
What I was getting to was that as me and my partner back then, because we were working as partners, we were 2 people taking care of 30,000 people, working this specific job, which was crime prevention in youth in the youth environments, with a special focus on drugs and prevention, and we learned and basically proved that the crime statistics are very much dependent on the police's effort.
I see.
So whenever we did a good job, or whenever we found out about things, made cases, discovered new young users of narcotics, and started processes that we meant were helping them, the statistics went up.
Right.
But that didn't mean that we we were often in the media, and we were often talking to parents. We had lectures for parents talking about how things are in these certain areas, talking about prevention, talking about how they could make a difference in the kids' lives, and how they could work together with the police, and we never said that things were off the hinges, and we never said that it's getting worse. No, it's just that we are discovering more and more.
I understand. I understand that, because of my background. I'm sure a lot of citizens understand that, but then again, a lot of them don't. and it kind of creates a false image of the crime situation in Norway. What do you guys do to combat that? Because public perception is important. I know it was very important for us in my time as a police officer. How do you guys feel about public perception, and what do you do to combat some of the wrong perceptions, the wrong images that the public is getting? Because as you say, you guys do a better job. You arrest more people. The public and the media especially think that there's more crime, and that's not necessarily the case.
Right. And it's hard for me to speak in general about this because I've had my experiences in the local environment here. So I can't really speak of the big national papers in Oslo and how they are tackling it. But I mean, we had...
Well, no, I was going to ask then, do you guys have any sort of campaign to keep the public properly informed in your district? You know, if you guys are doing a better job making more arrests, what do you guys do to calm the public, to try and give them the right image that, yes, you're doing a good job? That doesn't necessarily mean that there is more crime out there. Right.
And the easy answer to that is that it's pretty close contact with the police and the local press here. So there is...
There's no enemy. There's no us against them type of thing.
No, at least not intentionally. There is a vast opinion that we are to work together with the media, and they are focused on giving the truth. Most of the time. But then again, you know, it sells papers. So we're not always agreeing with the headlines. We're not always agreeing with how they, as you say, percept or how they see
interpret
things.
The situation.
Interpret the situation. And how they present it to the media. But I mean, then again, we can't go out and say everything that we know because, as you know, there's a lot of intelligence as well here. Which means we know a lot more than we can ever say to anyone outside the brotherhood.
There you go. Yeah. No, I never got involved with that media stuff. That was pretty tightly controlled in my department, and all the guys that wore the fancy white shirts with the gold stars on their collar. Right. Those are the guys that did all that stuff. So I really don't have any kind of image of what the police and press relationship was like when I was working, but I see it now as an outsider. And in both the United States and in Norway, the press gets it wrong a lot of the time.
Of course.
So knowing that they get it wrong, seeing that they get it wrong, do you guys do any active work to try and combat that false image that gets out there sometimes?
Yeah. And I guess I did that for many years with local work. My main, or our main goal when we did this work in the youth community and with the parents and working, I did that for 7 or 8 years before I got this job. The main thing was speaking to the public at a local small, in small groups at a time. We were expressive about it when as I said, I spent a lot of time talking in schools, talking in parent meetings, being in the local environments, being at youth clubs, being out with the kids, meeting them, going out of the car, talking to them. Important. And they ask, the public asks. And who are they going to ask? Well, it's us. It's the people wearing the uniforms. It's the people that they expect know how things are, and that's where we had to. Well, one thing, say the right things, but the other thing was how we said it and how we presented to them. Sure,
being a friendly face that isn't afraid to step out of that police vehicle, that right there. Takes down a lot of literally takes down a barrier. And that's one thing I like to see. I'm not that often in downtown Drammen, but when I am, I just love seeing the officers walking and outside of their cars and actually smiling with the people, shaking hands and just being available. There's something about that image. To be honest, I'd like to see more of that in Norway.
Because I was going to ask, how often do you really see it? Because I think it's a lack of that attitude lacks in Norwegian policing.
I guess
we love our cars.
Yeah, I guess I react to that very strongly because I so seldom see it. So that when I do, it's like, oh wow, yes, there they are. And
Exactly.
I know from my experience how important that is. I mean, we were out there, as we say, running and gunning and, finding, drugs and dealing with the gang members. But in the midst of all of that, we found the time to get out of our car and be seen by the people.
Right. And that's also how you get information, right? That's
I was just
also how you that's also how you keep the intelligence running and how you actually know what life is like on the street, because you don't learn anything from the back of your car, and just going out on the missions or on the tasks that are being phoned in by victims. Yeah. You have to be active, as you say.
Now, working with kids. Now, you've done that for most of your career so far, up until you got this job. What a rewarding job that is, but at the same time, what a disappointing job that is.
Yep.
What can you say about that? I think you know what I'm talking about, but how would you put that into words? How would you put that into words?
Well, the disappointment part is almost the easiest to talk about, because it's a pretty clear thing that we usually talk about when we, because we're struggling with making preventive police work the prioritized way of working, and that's a political thing, obviously, because
when you say political, because politics can be internal. There can be internal politics within the police, or are we talking about the politicians?
Well, both.
Okay,
because you can talk about preventive work in general, and the problem with preventive work is that it doesn't measure. Right, you can't put a number on how many people how many people did not start a criminal career because of your work.
Right, that's hard to measure.
Yeah, so at a certain sense you could probably, but that would take a lot. That would take a lot to place, let's say, 10 people in a project, and you do this and this and this, and you see how many of them. But that's not how it works, right? You go out and you influence probably 500 kids a year, and all you see is those that do not vote well. Yeah. Right.
All you see is trouble. All you see is crime. All you see is yeah.
So that's the negative thing about it. So you talk about the sunshine histories in the police. I mean, I have a couple of kids that were on a bad path where I did what I had to do, and I did probably more than was required.
You gave a little extra of yourself.
Yeah, I gave a little extra of myself, and things worked. And those are stories that I can look back on, and we could talk, me and my partner and also others, and look, it actually works. But I mean, those are few, because you don't notice the people that you actually do a good job with. You just notice those that slipped, right? And this also, and when we talked about the internal politics in the police, it's the same problem. And this is kind of controversial, but it's not a secret that the police in Norway is much too focused on the numbers. It's ruled by the numbers, and it's ruled by the not only the cleared cases, right? It's ruled by the green numbers.
Yes.
By how much gets away from our desk after it comes in. Yeah. So the preventive part of it, as you said. So when the conclusion is you can't measure it, then you just have to present the facts of the matter, that it can't be controlled, it can't be measured. You just know it works.
Yeah. That's a hard thing to argue. Even though we know that is factual, it's very hard to argue that, especially to a politician or to someone in a higher leadership position in the police network. That's difficult.
Because those people needs to show short-time results to be able to continue in their leading positions, which is actually true for the highest police leaders now as well.
I'm going to make a prediction. And we're going to come back in maybe 10, 15 years and see if I'm right. I predict that you're going to have a very high and important position in the police, and you're going to be an influential person in Norwegian police, or at least in your district, because, again, you're quite young to have that type of job that you have. And when you look at some of the older, more senior people in the police, they haven't had the same kind of experience as you are gathering now. So these things, these concepts of, we know this works, but we can't show you how it works. We just know it works. That kind of experience, some of those older guys have never had, because that type of police work was not being done 15, 20, 25 years ago. It's only now in the most recent years that this type of work is happening. So there's my prediction. You're going to have a few stars on your shoulder, and you're going to be making some decisions.
Well, that's I think that's a good prediction. If it's not me, it's someone like me, and I think that's the positive thing. About it.
There's more and more young guys like yourself who are getting the experiences that you guys are getting, and of course you're going to take that further, and it will slowly over time change the way police work is done in Norway. It's going to happen, absolutely.
And it already has, which I hope we will get into with more in this conversation, with more details about how we actually work. Because in the job I have now, with how we are actually investigating cases, just go back 10, 12, 15 years, not more, just a couple of years before I actually started the academy, maybe even when I went to the academy. We'll get back to it. It's totally different, and we've learned so much.
I want to get back to some of the investigative techniques. I'm sure some of that stuff is privileged information, but whatever you can tell.
Oh well, not really. So that's good. That could be a good.
We'll definitely get into that. Absolutely. Yeah. But before we get to that, okay. Now we talked about the frustrating side, or the negative side of working with children, and that is that it's hard to see the results of your work. Yep. But then there's also a sunny side to that. What have you experienced in that aspect?
Well, first of all, working in a small place, a relatively small place like this, you get a lot of love, basically, for better and for worse. Yeah. I mean, our technique and our approach to working with children and youth, because we had a range from 13 to 21 or 23. That was that was what we could manage, what we were capable of doing, and also where stuff happens, to be fair. But our way of approaching things were being available, and most of the time, not most of the time, but a lot of the time, we would just sit in the schools. We would just sit in the schools talking to kids. It would give us a lot of information, so it was obviously a thought behind it. But then again, the kids were they got safe. They felt safe with us, and learned our first names, and spoke to us with our first names. Well, actually, our last names, but but as if they were our first names.
Yes,
and we were just those guys. We were. My partner is called. His last name is McLeod. Actually, he's married with a New Zealand girl.
Okay.
So we were Melbye and McLeod for many years, and everybody knew us. And they wanted to talk to us. They wanted to. And where I'm getting at, after, because we didn't just cuddle with them. We didn't just talk cars and mopeds and whatever they were interested in. Yeah. We actually also showed them that we were there. We weren't joking around. If you did something illegal, we were going to be there as police officers doing our job. Yeah. But if they needed our help, we were also going to be there.
And that's good police work, making kids aware of the consequences of their bad behavior, or their bad behavior will bring consequences, but also showing them that you're there. You're an ear for them to talk into. You are there as a support person, a responsible adult. They get to see both sides of that. There's not enough of that in Norway yet. There's not enough of that yet.
Exactly. And what I'm describing is actually parenting, right? It's parenting. It's good parenting. And as a consequence of this, the people that we actually reported, and the people where we discovered crimes being done at a young enough age, so that they learned.
It can be life-changing.
And even the people that didn't learn, they would remember this as not a negative thing.
Exactly.
And I've had a lot of kids coming up to me that are not kids anymore, and saying, "I'm so happy that you called me. I'm so glad that you saw me. I'm so glad that you made an investment and that you believed that there was.
Well, I tell you that. Are you there? You fell out.
I know.
There we go. Now I hear you. Yeah.
I can't see you anymore.
That's probably a good thing.
There you are.
There we go.
Yeah.
No, I was going to say that, and that is the beautiful side of police work and the beautiful side of working with children. The first job I had here in Norway, I got hired by the city of Drammen to run a after-school project for kids in general, but with a focus on kids who are kind of, at the tipping point. They could go one way or another when it comes to childhood delinquency.
All right.
And to see, there's a lot of those rose-colored success stories during those years I was doing that. But what's better than that is now, because we moved away up to Finnmark and Nord-Troms for a while, and then we came back here. And almost the first or second day after we came back, I would run into these kids who are now adults. Some of them have families and kids of their own. Right. And it almost would bring tears to my eyes to see that kid who had so many problems back then, and now they're doing just fine.
Yeah, exactly. And it's not about you at all. It's just about the kids, and that's rewarding.
It's a beautiful thing, and that makes up for a lot, not for all of the bad experiences, but it makes up for a lot of it. Absolutely.
But I think that's what's special about us, the brotherhood. We can take it, right? And we have each other to bounce off of when it is actually important, and that's a culture that's also developing in Norway. I think that's also something here that has developed over the last years, and I'm glad to experience this. That we now have the
debrief after.
Yeah. That's a good word, but even it's organized as well. But the the threshold for
the threshold. Thank you.
It's easier now to talk with even your one colleague about something that was difficult at work.
And that's a beautiful thing. I tell you, that didn't exist in my day when I was working. Right. You just didn't. I don't know.
You were just hard.
Everyone was expected to just kind of suck it up and just march on. And a lot of it we covered with humor. Some of the things we laughed at was it's crazy, but to have that formal outlet, it didn't have to be a psychologist or anything, but we, just to have a boss, a lieutenant, to talk to, and that just didn't exist.
No.
And I missed that then. I don't know if I was the weirdo who wanted that kind of talk, that kind of thing, but it just didn't exist back then.
All right. It was probably just not you.
Probably not. But to see that there is a system for debriefing, a system for a psychological outlet if it's necessary, and the police here in Norway is a good thing to see.
Yeah, there's a lot of focus on it, and most of the time I've had this experience actually that after a relatively brutal event where more people on the station here were involved, we had a sit down with a professional psychologist, and as a group, and what we actually learned, or what he said, is that the most important thing here is that you guys talk to each other, because even I, as an educated psychologist, I can't fathom what you guys
didn't live it. He didn't live it.
No, he didn't live it at all. So he can know something about the psychological processes and the terminology and everything, but he doesn't know what it's like, and that's why the brotherhood is so important and why we have that low threshold.
Well, I tell you, I think there's a lot of cases. I should say, I don't know how they deal with this today in police in America, but again, in my day, it didn't really exist. And I can only imagine how many of the guys and ladies that I worked with have some form of PTSD today, because they didn't work through some of the things that they experienced. Right. To this day, I wish I had someone to talk to back then about some of the things I saw.
Right. It's probably a factor that one of the goals of the government here is to get a 50-50 men and women police officers. That's actually kind of.
What do you think about that? I'm going to put you on the spot. Let me tell you what I think
about that. I just said something about why it's positive, because we need the female culture in the police department. For one of the reasons is what we just talked about.
Yeah.
Because obviously men are. I'm not saying it's all flowers and suns here when it comes to talking about problems. And
no.
One of the reasons is that it's still a male-dominated profession.
Yeah.
At least for the moment, it's getting to not be such a male-dominant profession, but historically, it has definitely been.
Yeah.
But what do I think about women in policing? Well, I'm positive.
The best partner I ever had was she wasn't really a partner. She just worked the same shift as I did. Connie Trevino was her name, and she was the toughest, most intelligent and badass cop that I ever worked with. Connie Trevino. So yeah.
I'd like to meet her.
Yeah. So of course I agree with you. I think having women on the police force is a positive thing. But here is one issue that I have with it. I'm just going to throw this out there. Sure. You have an unruly person in public. He's drunk, maybe. He's been fighting. The police show up. He wants to keep fighting. Both police officers who show up are female. Is that an optimal situation? No. I would say that it's not an optimal situation.
It's not, and it's not as if it's a dead discussion here. Not at all.
Yeah.
The talking about, I mean, the subject is it's subject to both chatter locally and between individuals, but the good thing is it's at a higher level as well, because exactly the situation that you pointed out is it's just facts, you know. And plus there are no size demands anymore to becoming a police.
Really?
And that happened actually before I joined the academy.
I didn't know that.
I think, I just got a little insecure now if that happened after I was done or before, but it doesn't really matter because it's around that time.
Because it used to be a height and weight requirement, correct?
Yeah, not weight.
Maybe just height. Yeah.
Yeah, but height that led with it some weight. so you couldn't. And there was a difference between men and women.
Yes. Yes.
But if you meet a female police officer here that is older than, let's say, 35, 36 years of age, she will be around 1 meter 80 centimeters.
That's taller than me, I have to say.
At least I think she would have to be more than 170.
Yeah.
And the guys had to be more than 175 or something. Yeah. I'm guessing now, to be fair.
Yeah.
But all of them are tall. But now you're seeing the more normal sized women coming in, and
that is something that I have noticed through the years. I have noticed it, but I didn't know it was because they changed the requirement for height. I didn't know that.
Well, that is actually, and you also get the small guys coming in, and I mean, you can say what you want about it, and it's I don't think it's such a controversial theme because of the situation that you just spoke about. You can't put two 120-pound women up against a 220-pound guy on amphetamines, right?
Yeah.
It doesn't work.
Yeah.
Not only do you put the police officers in danger, but you have to actually put him in danger as well, because they would have to use the things in their belt to be able to be safe.
A gradually higher level of force than what might be necessary. Yeah.
Exactly. So again, it's not a dead theme.
But is there? So the height I'm sorry to interrupt, but the height requirement is gone. But what about fitness levels? Physical fitness levels, strength, conditioning, things like that. What are the requirements there?
Well, they first of all, they've been lowered since the academy.
Really?
Yeah, and they've been lowered for a few reasons.
Wow.
They were lowered as Norway desperately needed more police officers. So they opened 2 new schools a few years after my time, I think, and doubled the amount of students that were getting in. And then ultimately they would have to lower the bar so that they would fill up the spaces. And this is kind of maybe slightly unloyal theme to talk about, because I mean you automatically criticize the people that came in with on the lower bars than the people before. But then again,
just blame it on me. Just tell them that that podcast host tricked me.
But I mean, I'm not nervous about it, because it's just facts.
Yeah.
So that doesn't mean that people are weaker. It just means that the average maybe becomes. So obviously you have a less strong physically police force now than you had 20 years ago. No doubt about it.
I'm surprised by that.
Well,
wow.
Yeah, and then again, Norway had changed in 2001 or something, from being police academy to being a university.
That's right. I believe it was right before I came. I came here the summer of 2002.
Yeah, I think it was 2001.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
I believe it was 2001 because I may be wrong, but it's around those times. So that sounds right. You come in 2002, and so the focus, and I think this is obviously a good thing isolated. The Norwegian, the education for becoming a police officer became much more demanding when it comes to curriculums. It became a bachelor degree, which it wasn't before. It became
before it was more of like just a certification kind of.
Well, I think they had classes and such. But I think that's a pretty accurate description of the difference. So now all of a sudden we have psychology. We have it's one of the most widely ranged educations in Norway, actually. When it touches on different subjects.
Yeah, it touches on a lot of different subjects. Yeah.
Psychology, sociology, criminology, along with all of the other police subjects, such as investigative techniques and crime forensics and.
So what do you say to the salty old officer, he's maybe in his 50s or older, who says, okay, you young guys are taking all of this school time, but that's not making you better police officers. We were better police officers in our day than you are. What do you say to someone like that? I
don't think I would have to say that, because I don't think I would have to be in that situation a lot, because times have changed as well, the police have changed, but the police work has also changed, is what you're saying. And to the better. But I mean, you still have to be able to manage the stuff that they did in the 80s as well. But, I mean, and the way of working. But what would I reply? I don't know.
I guess what I'm looking at is, okay, you're 18 years old. You go into the police academy. You get out, and you're 23, maybe?
That bar has also just been lowered, by the way. There was a 20 years limit when I started. Now it's 19.
Yeah.
So it's going more and more down. Yeah.
So you could in theory be 23 years old and you're ready to step out on the streets and be a police officer. So I would ask the question, is a 23-year-old, now I'm just going back, I guess I'm taking this from my own perspective. When I was 23 years old, there's no way I personally was ready, and I didn't know of anyone around me who would have had the maturity to be a police officer. What do you say? What are your thoughts about that young age, that young guy out there on the streets, and he could literally have people's lives in his hands?
Well, I definitely think that no matter how many classes you study, no matter how many books you read, you're never going to be able to learn police work without being on the street, without doing it. So experience will always count, no matter how the school was. I think we have. I think it's for the good that the school has changed. I think it's for the good that we have more curriculums coming out of the school, because we have more knowledge to connect to our beginning experience, which is only positive. But I would have nothing to say against someone who has been working as a police officer for 30 years, because he has experienced exactly the same things that I am going to experience working on the street for the next 30 years. I'm just going to have another approach to it, probably, which I hope is positive. That's a very wise answer. That's a well thought out answer.
that came naturally. So that tells me that you've maybe put some thought into that subject before.
Yeah, because we're there all the time. I constantly work with people who went out of the school before the school changed, as I just described. Yeah. There are still guys here who are from the old school, literally, right? And these questions they do, or these conversations they do happen weekly here. I mean,
sure.
I always hear the stories. It wasn't like this back in the days. Yeah. We didn't do it like this back in the days.
Yeah.
There was less bureaucracy back in the days. Yeah. Which is true. And not all bureaucracy is good. Not at all. I think it should be less.
But structure is important.
Yeah. Definitely. And we're better police officers now, more than they were in the 80s, definitely, but not in every 100% every aspect of the job. That wouldn't be true.
One thing that breaks my heart about there's two things. The first thing that breaks my heart about the new system of police work, of police education in Norway, is that they go through the police college, they get their education, they're ready to be a police officer, but there's no job.
Oh yeah. That's a big one.
And we said earlier that there is a need for more police in Norway. We both agree on that. I think most people agree with that. I think most police officers agree with that. And definitely the politicians are saying it. So what is this phenomenon where a police officer gets finished with their education and they sit for a year or two? Or I just saw in the newspaper a couple of days ago, a lady who has sat for 3 years and still hasn't gotten a job.
Yeah. This is a subject that is hard for me to discuss in depth because it gets...
That's political, I guess.
It gets a little too political for me to actually have the answer to it. But I mean, we experience it every day with... the simple answer is money. And the simpler answer is the money is controlled by... it's not controlled by police officers, so to speak.
Right.
We're not the politicians. Yeah. And we talked about this number before: 2 per 1,000 capita or inhabitants. And you always hear the politicians saying, "Well, we're there," and when you know you're not, right? So I'm going to be a little careful just talking about the trickery of numbers and stuff because I really don't know too much about it. Yeah. But but what I can say is that it breaks my heart as well, and it breaks the heart of the students that will go through a 3-year education and actually. Well, some of them is the accurate way to say it, will never be police officers. Yeah. And when I started, actually, one of the things that made me really happy about the education was they actually promised us a job. That was one of the big selling points to being a police in Norway. You were always going to get a state job. You were always going to get a job. And they said that until... And I was lucky. I got there just in time because a couple of 3 years after I started, they doubled up the amount of students, and this shit started.
Wow, that's just, I tell you, it's sad. Every once in a while, it will hit the media that this officer is without a job after being educated, and it's just see when I went in, they and this may vary from place to place in the United States because for those American or non-Norwegian or non-Scandinavian listeners, Norway is like a national police force, whereas as you know, John Eivind, it's broken down to federal, then state, then county, and local in the states. But when I went in, I was hired before I went to the police academy. So you have a job. All you have to do is complete all you have to do is complete the program and you're in because you've been hired already.
All right. So first you get the job and then you get the training.
It was a long process. I remember so clearly because it was exciting. I kind of just fell into police work. I had been in the U.S. Marines for 4 years. I got out. I didn't know what I was going to do. I had no idea what I wanted to do for a life. So I took a job as a truck driver. I had seen a lot of places in Asia. I was stationed on Okinawa, Japan. So I had seen all of that, but I wanted to see the United States. So I took a job as a truck driver. Did that for about 18 months, roughly. And then I saw that they were hiring for the local police department there in the Chicago suburbs. So I'm like, why not? that's kind of how I got into police work. So it was a series of interviews, a couple of written tests, a psychological test of some sort, and a physical test, and then another round of interviews, and then they set up a hiring list. I think there were 300 people on that hiring list, and they just go down the list from the highest ranked to the lowest, and just hire people one or maybe two at a time. Right. And I was number one on that list. That's one of my life's greatest achievements. I'm so proud of that.
That is impressive.
So that is the process that I went through, and it's still a little bit surreal because I didn't necessarily want to be a police officer. I just wanted a job, something different from truck driving, and I just kind of fell into it, and then it just turned into my life's passion. I just I love that job.
Right. So, and that's interesting. And I actually thought about asking you this because we talk about the difference between the educational systems in the United States and Norway. And I listened to the podcast with Michael Wexler where he spoke about the same things. Yeah. And would that be, you would have to theoretically start at scratch if you were going to be a police officer here, right? Or have you checked out that?
If I were to want to become a police officer here, and by the way, I don't want to be a police officer, and I'll tell you, I can tell you why later. Right. I would have to go back to the very beginning and qualify, apply to go to police school and then go through the entire program. That makes me. I mean, I don't want, as I said, I don't want to be a police officer, but the fact that they don't even acknowledge my educational credentials as a police officer in the States, it counts for nothing here. And I think that's fascinating. I think that's strange.
Yeah, I think it's strange. And I think Norway is like that in every profession or every educational thing, maybe.
I know there are some exceptions, and there's certain fields of work where you would have to take maybe a class or two to get certified. Right. Yeah, so it varies, but none of my police education. I'm also a trained paramedic.
Oh, really?
Yeah, wow. I'm also a full paramedic, but that doesn't count here either.
That's weird because bodies are bodies.
You would think. The Norwegian drunks are with akkevitt, and the American ones are with Budweiser, but they're still drunk. So
they're still drunk. You would probably still do the same things to keep them alive.
No, it's been a moment of frustration in my life here in Norway because from time to time it would have been nice to have that education recognized and accredited here in Norway. But it's not.
Right.
It's not.
I think it's credited by the people you talk about it with. Anyway, if that's if you know what I mean. I mean, if you're telling me you're a police officer, I'm not thinking, yeah, sure, but you're from America. I'm thinking you're a former police officer.
That's good. That's good.
So I don't. That's not much of a comfort, but I mean. But I was actually interested in because I've spoken a bit about how we now do all these curriculum things, and was the education or the training to be a police officer, was it how long did it take, and how extensive was it? It
was 3.5 months at the school at the University of Illinois.
All right.
And then after that, it was like a ride-along program, like a mentoring program where I was with an experienced officer. And that, to me, was the most important part of the training because I was actually in uniform on the street doing the job. And that lasted, I cannot remember how long, maybe a month or two. But that can be extended. It depends on what department, what police force you're on. It can be anywhere from a month to 3 months to 6 months to a year. It all depends.
Oh, really? All right.
Depends on where you are, and also depends on how you do.
Oh, okay.
So
you probably didn't take that long.
Well, no,
because you did so well.
Not to brag, but it was a very short period of time, and then I worked as a regular uniformed patrol officer for a short period of time, and then very quickly, like within within 2 years, I was working as a detective, a narcotics and gang detective.
Right.
So I moved up fairly quick, and I went from being totally because I'm a country guy from way out in the country, and then all of a sudden here I am living and working in the South Chicago suburbs. So that was a big change. It was an enormous challenge. It was an eye opener. Even after my 4 years in the U.S. Marines, that's different. That's a different kind of tactical and operative position to be in.
Of course.
You know, you're not tight up on people like you are very tight with people as a police officer. So that style of people in the South Chicago suburbs was totally foreign to me. It was easier for me to move from Chicago to Norway than it was for me to go from my hometown in Ohio to Chicago to be an officer. Yes, absolutely, it was.
That explains.
But I turned all that around. I turned all that confusion into focus relatively quickly, and I was there for 7 years before we moved here.
Wow. And Chicago is they're pretty high crime rates there, right?
Yeah, it's Chicago is a very high crime city. Very often it's been the murder capital of the United States. Now, where I was in the south suburbs, it wasn't that bad.
Oh, okay.
But still, it's that Chicago area. And it can vary wildly. There's certain areas in the city that are it's almost like a war zone. But then when you get around the suburbs, especially the northern suburbs, it's some of the most fantastic and beautiful neighborhoods you're going to find in the United States. So it varied quite a bit. But the thing that was prevalent over that entire Chicago area was the drug thing. Chicago, you know, being geographically located where it is, you know, you have drugs that come up from South America and Mexico, and then the highway system. What is that? I think it's Interstate 65 goes all the way from Texas and straight up through St. Louis and into Chicago. So big drug shipments would come into Chicago, and then from there it would be sent east and west to New York and Los Angeles. So Chicago has always been like a drug hub for the United States.
I didn't know that.
Yes, yeah. And with that comes all of the gang troubles. I don't know. I don't have any numbers on how many gang members are, but we're talking in the tens of thousands. If you can imagine that. Yeah.
I can't imagine that here. I mean, Chicago is a big city, but I can't imagine those numbers here.
Yeah, it's totally different. And just to clear that up, because I said I don't want to be a police officer on the street here, because and I have all respect to you guys who do the job, but I don't think, or I didn't think when I came here that I could ever change my mindset.
Right.
It's a much more aggressive type of police work in the States, and for the most part, much more dangerous.
Of course.
There's a different kind of crime element, and I always felt like I would never be able to calm down.
You wouldn't get down to our level.
and I don't mean that in a derogatory way, but
I know.
You know what I mean. But now, as I'm older and totally acclimated to Norway, I'd probably be a pretty decent police officer here. But at that time, when I was younger and I had that
state of mind,
I don't think it would have fit. It wouldn't have fit here.
And you wouldn't be able to wear a gun here. So
you know, and that was a big issue as well. I couldn't, and I still can't imagine doing the type of police work that I would like to do without a weapon. I just couldn't imagine it. But again, all respect to you guys, because I think it takes a certain kind of bravery for you guys to do the job that you do and not be armed. It takes a certain skill set to be able to get the job done without a weapon.
Yeah, well, communication is a big part of it's 90% of what we do. It's communications, obviously. So,
and having said that, it's not like I had to pull my gun every day. That just didn't happen, you know. Because communication, regardless of where you're a police officer, doesn't matter where you are in the world. I'm sure those two guys in Russia who came to my police academy, they have to have a certain amount of communication to be able to do their job. Yeah,
obviously,
yeah.
Oh, that's interesting. I mean, we've had the debate about guns here many times. It's been on and off, but I always fall back to and not all my colleagues agree. Obviously, we're split in the police force. It's I would say a 50-50 split in the police force, to take a wild guess. And I'm on that side. I don't think we need it. No, and the main, I don't think we need it here. I would be. It's supposed to be a unified police force in Norway. Everything is going to be is always going to be similar. So the police in Oslo is going to do exactly the same thing as the police in U.S.A, where I work.
Yeah.
And in Oslo, maybe there are better arguments for having always armed cops. In U.S.A, it would be a disadvantage, to be fair.
You think so?
Yeah, because I've experienced the type of police work that I've done, and I've done everything. I mean, because we arm ourselves when we have to. So I've done everything. But in the vast majority of every job that I do, every mission that we do, and every call we get called out to, it would be a disadvantage for me because the other side wouldn't be armed.
Yeah.
There are virtually no guns here in the criminal.
Totally different culture when it comes to the gun issue. Absolutely. Yeah.
Then again, and this I've learned more and more, and I've been more focused on it lately. Actually, I would rather meet a person with a 9mm than with a big knife.
I agree.
Yeah. So I'm kind of.
I had a guy pull a knife on me once on the job, and that was probably the most scared I've been on the job.
Right. Yeah. And I've experienced that a few times, and unintelligently being not as scared as I should be. Yeah. When I've actually seen how bad people get injured by a single stab or whatever.
It's ugly.
And it's ugly. It's and a knife is life-threatening from quite a distance.
Absolutely. That's another thing people don't realize. They're thinking if the person is holding a knife and they're a couple of steps away, you're okay. Mm-hmm. You're not. They close that distance in the blink of an eye, and all of a sudden you're cut. Yeah. Exactly.
So I tell people, try and we did this with kids actually, where we spoke about this just for fun, but it's a serious matter. We made them stand like 10 yards, 20 yards from each other, and we would time it. How many seconds would you take to approach the other guy? And they would guess, and they always guess wrong because it's you just use a second to travel 20 yards if you're fast enough.
Yeah.
It's like a second or two.
It's crazy, and it's an eye opener when you do something like that, and then they're like, "Okay, I'm going to think a little bit differently about knives." But
exactly.
how it seems to be. Well, I don't know. I don't want to say it seems to be, but I'll just ask you: how is is knives on the street on the rise? I know there have been periods where it's been in the news that more and more kids, especially in Oslo, are running around with knives and actually using them. What are you seeing out there?
Well, in specific groups, I think it's on the rise.
Okay.
But they are very specific groups.
Yeah.
And
known criminal.
Not talking big. What?
Like criminal groups that they're some sort of gang, and that's what they do. Yeah.
Yeah. A few years ago, when I was younger, I usually experienced knives on the older addicts. They were wearing knives just because they didn't trust us. They didn't trust anyone. They would have knives on and claim that it was for their own protection, but we never heard about any knife fights or anything. They just had the blades on them for obviously not no apparent reason, but as I said, they had their reasons, but there were never any, or rarely any conflicts. And now it's all kids think it's cool, and the gangsters, to quote them, the young gangsters, they don't wear it for their own protection. They wear it to intimidate and to be cool, and to it's part of a culture. I think we have some young kids that threaten each other with knives, but it's very rare. And a police officer in Oslo would probably tell these stories differently.
Sure.
Maybe they have some statistics that are vastly very different from my experience here. And I've never worked in a big city. Actually,
Okay.
well, that's not true. I worked 1 year in Sandefjord, which was a very criminal city.
Yeah.
But that was my my intern year, because we also have 1
That's
year
right,
during our education where we where we have a mentor.
Yeah.
And I got my first job there as a as an investigator, actually. And but that was 1 year after school, and then I've been here for the last 8 years. So.
You said something a couple of minutes back where you said that police work is expected to be the same all over Norway. The methods, the methodology, the philosophy. How practical do you think that is? How wise do you think that is? Because Norway is not a monolith. Norway is quite different from from district to district.
Yeah, and I think we've already covered some of that question by talking about both the difference between living up north or rural versus city, where you have to maybe be more familiar with individuals, know names, know who people are, and you use that as a tool, as kind of a weapon to
I see, yeah.
To raise the threshold for crime, because the police knows who you are, right? Yeah. And that's a mentality that's different from the big cities to the rural cities, obviously. But our methods, I think they should be what's it called? People should expect our methods to be a certain way, no matter where you meet the police.
I see.
But I don't think it's. You asked me if it's how practical is it. I don't think it's. I don't think we work 100% similarly. Depending on where you are, because you can't. So if you that's exactly why I said if you talk to a police officer in Oslo, downtown Oslo, that's worked there for 20 years, he will have a he will have a different approach to an individual than.
I would think that the criminal element from Oslo to Gjøvik is pretty different. And then again, from like Gjøvik up to Finnmark, it's a totally different criminal element. Probably. But above and beyond that, I think what I know is that the people, the citizenry is drastically different, especially between up north in Finnmark in Nord-Troms and here in southern Norway. The people are just different. I look at this. I look at this crazy woman I'm married to. She's from she's from Finnmark, and she's like an alien down here. She's just.
Oh, that's actually it's a long ass country. It's So
the dynamic is quite different. The customs and just the way the people are is quite different, and I would think that demands a differentness, if we can use that word, within the police force.
Yeah, probably. Yeah. And then you have the methods of how we do things by the book that will always be the same, obviously. And when it comes to when you can arrest, when you can search, when you can seize, when you can, all of these.
Here's a what if situation. You are on patrol in your city in Gjøvik, and I come driving by in my car, and I look over and I see you, and then I get that scared rabbit look in my face, look to the front, roll up my window, and speed up a little bit and drive quickly away. Right. Do you have the right as a police officer to stop me to find out why I reacted like that when I saw you?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah.
Yes, and that's a big difference. And I mean, from here in the States, I guess. And this, I'll be honest, this I got this. This is Hollywood knowledge. so I'm wondering if I'm correct here, but you have to have a traffic reason for stopping someone in their car, right?
No.
No. Okay, so I got that wrong. That is a Hollywood.
It can be what we can loosely call suspicious behavior that has nothing to do with traffic.
Right.
Yeah.
So what our police law says, it's a pretty wide law, which gives us a lot of working space, because it basically says that we can detain any individual as long as there is a tjenestelig grunn.
A reason, a reason, probable cause is what we would say.
Yeah, but I would translate probable cause to that's probably right. Anyway, the wordings in the Norwegian law means that it doesn't take a lot. But then it would make a difference between just stopping a random individual in the middle of a shopping mall, a guy that doesn't differentiate from anyone.
Okay.
But all I have to see is that little different behavior to have a reason. I mean, we usually talk to kids about this because we want them to know what they can expect from the police. We usually talk to the
I love that. This. I love that you guys do that. I love it.
Yeah, because that creates less tension, and it creates respect, and it also creates less situations where they get mad at us for doing what we do.
Yeah.
And it's usually easy for me to talk to the kids about it, because I just have to look at my watch to have a reason to detain a kid, right?
Okay.
If it's after, and we have this in our laws, if it's after 10 o'clock and you're under the age of 16, I can detain you, ask you who you are, why you're here, where are your parents. It's my responsibility then to make sure you're okay as a police officer in our laws.
I love it.
Yeah. And cars are even easier, because we flip it around, I guess. If I can just say that I want to check your papers, I can just say I can say that I'm curious. If you do that to the same person again and again and again and again for no reason, and the actual fact is that there is no reason, that's obviously not okay, and that would be harassment. But that usually doesn't happen. But the situation that you described, that's enough for me to call it probable cause, if that's the correct translation.
So, because but that behavior gives you a reasonable suspicion that I've done something wrong or am about to do something wrong.
Yeah, at least a reasonable suspicion. It's high enough for me to check it out.
Okay.
And the same goes with checking IDs. When you're in a car, you can always check your ID, obviously, because I want to check if you have a driver's license. But on the street, I can't just check your ID. There has to be a probable cause. There has to be a tjenestelig grunn for me to stop you. So I can't just randomly pick a guy and say, I'm going to check if you're a criminal. That's not legal, but we don't do that.
So you can stop my car and ask to check my driver's license, the registration on the car. Can you make me get out of the car? Yeah, I can make you get out of the car, but again, I can never make you do anything unless I have a reason. So I wouldn't ask a guy to get out of the car for no apparent reason. Well, let's say you have a reason. Am I, as a citizen, allowed to ask you or to demand that you tell me what that reason is, or do I just have to listen to you and get out of the car without being explained? That's a very interesting question. And my answer to that would be that I would, me personally, would expect that a police officer would be able to word out the reason why he would want me to get out of the car. It shouldn't have to be. 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 It's because I'm the police, right? And that's what I like about. I don't respect that. Yeah, and that's what I like about you guys. That's kind of what I was trying to get at. I was playing the bad guy here, but you guys have this thing. You guys don't have that. There seems to be an animosity between American police and American citizens, a certain demographic of American citizens that is just kind of ground into their very essence. It's an us against them, and both sides are looking at it like that. Yeah. And I don't see that here. And of course, with some of the gangs and the criminal elements in Norway, of course, they feel that way. You need that culture to work with. But in the citizenry, in the general citizenry, I don't see that us against them, and I love that. Because there's too much of that in America. There's way too much of that. But that doesn't exist here. I never see that. No, you're a bad apple in the police if that's if that's how you approach a normal citizen. Well, I don't think it would be tolerated. I bet you that officer would probably lose his job. Yeah, well, you guys seem to have you guys have a certain level of professionalism that I don't know what your internal regulations are, but I just couldn't see an officer like that being an officer in Norway.
Nope, it's a pretty good culture. We have bad apples,
sure.
No question about it. And there are differences between police officers in how they in their communication skills, obviously. And I have witnessed police officers using the "because I'm a police" argument. Even though there is a cause, but they don't, but they maybe lack the conversational skills to explain what they're doing. Maybe they lack experience. Maybe they actually lack some knowledge about the laws.
That's what I was going to say. Is someone saying "because I'm the police"? That's a person who lacks some communication skills and maybe lacks some academic knowledge.
Yeah, it proves ignorance, and it doesn't. You can't demand respect from the person you're talking to if you don't know what you're doing.
And that kind of goes back to what I was talking about a while ago about the younger officers who don't have the life experience, who don't have the experience as a police officer.
Right.
I can imagine and I don't want to talk bad about the police. Like I said, I have the utmost respect for you guys, but I have seen in certain situations. For example, when I was working with children at my first job here, and I would see some officers who kind of went overboard in their disciplinary stance to some of these children. And I think that is rooted in inexperience. These guys were young officers, fairly new, and they just totally overreacted. And I think that has to do with experience. So that's kind of what I'm thinking of when I question that young age of new police officers, that they may not be ready for the job.
Yep, which makes it even more important for the leaders to mix it up with the experienced ones, because we have a lot.
Good point.
And that's usually a good solution to that. Yeah. You have to learn from your elders, even though they are from the old school, and that's what I was talking about before, that it doesn't matter what school you're from. If you've been on the streets for 30 years, you know how to handle, you know how to communicate, you know what you're doing. Sure. It's in your backbone, right? Yeah. It's in your reflexes. So, and the Norwegian laws hasn't changed that much in, at least not from in the time that I've been around. So,
there hasn't been any drastic changes in the laws at all. No,
not really, and especially not in how we are allowed to conduct our police work. That has been the same for decades, and so even the people that are 30 years above me in experience, they've led by the same rules for as long as they've worked. Yeah.
What's your favorite American cop movie or TV show?
Well, when I was younger, almost every Norwegian you would meet is an Anglophilian. Is that a right word? Yeah. So we love America by the pop culture, and we've grown up with it. I was a big fan of the Beverly Hills Cop movies when I was younger.
Yes.
I grew up with Axel Foley.
Axel Foley,
and I watched them over and over again. And I didn't tell you this, but I'm like you. I never dreamed about being a cop.
Okay.
I also fell into it by chance. I got the dream of this job I got after I started the academy, but I remember the cop movies, obviously, from when I was younger. So Axel Foley made me want to drive in my convertible around Beverly Hills, and
well, that's a better role model than mine. I like Training Day. With I tell you, that movie. I
love the movie. Obviously,
I shouldn't say he's my role model. Good God, no, he's not my role model in that movie. But the movie,
he's not your police role model, but the movie's got.
But the movie is good. What a raw picture. But the sad thing is that there are cops. His whole unit was hardcore and corrupt like that, and unfortunately, you can go back to the Rodney King incident in, when was that, 1991, where that whole detective unit in the Los Angeles Police Department was just no good.
Right.
So I guess things like that is what led to movies like Training Day. Yeah,
I would predict that it wasn't all fantasy from the director. I guess it has some.
I'm sure it was. I bet if you go on Wikipedia, I bet you there'll be something in there about some police consultant who consulted for that movie, and I bet you the consultation was based in actual things that happened in Los Angeles.
Probably from a guy who didn't want his movie in the ending credits. He didn't want his name in the ending credits. No, but we joked about it, we joke about it when people ask me in Norway about what I learned in school, and I usually say that, well, we basically just watched Die Hard for 3 years. That was my main curriculum.
We watched episodes of Cops.
Right, because sure,
and critique it. What did the officers do right? What did the officers do wrong? We would talk about safety. We would talk about officer safety.
Did that in school?
Yeah.
That's
officer safety, because if you watch those episodes, very few of those officers are concerned about, keeping an acceptable distance from an irritated subject, for example. Little things like that. So we use that to learn. Yeah.
Right.
Absolutely.
Wow. I never thought about it. I watched a lot of Cops, but I was also always fascinated about how I've never seen an episode of Cops where I hear a stressed voice from one of the officers. I mean, maybe when they're running or when they're fatigued and all, but when they're talking to an individual, even an aggravated one, they always have this correct manner of speaking to them. And it's the same language every time with the same sentences and the way of building up your,
There is, I cannot remember the name of this business, but it was a business that was started by former police officers. I should actually look this up as we're talking. But they had a concept. They called it verbal judo.
Right.
Verbal judo, and it was widespread across police academies. I believe it started like in the early 90s. I was in the police academy in 96. But I believe it started in the early 90s, and it was basically exactly that, verbal judo, how to turn a person's words into your favor so that you could resolve a conflict.
Right.
A fascinating way of working. And there's certain phrases that they would use like I understand that.
Yeah.
Regardless of what they're saying, it can be the most crazy bullshit ever, but I understand that. And
it's about acknowledging.
Exactly. Yeah. And everything about the way you use your hands, never ball up your fists, keep your hands open, and movements like that. What we call placating movements, calming movements, and I talk like that to this day. You probably have seen me as I'm sitting here. I talk like that to this day, but that's because of what and then also using your hands like that, it creates kind of like a subconscious protective barrier between you and a combative subject. So it's little things like that I still use to this day, 20 years later. So
I remember we learned about a technique called mirroring. You probably heard of it, and you use it to kids as well.
Absolutely.
It's hard being aggravated to a person that is always calm. So if you are calm all the time, you will get a calm person eventually.
Yeah. Eventually.
So that's mirroring. You will mirror, or the person who is not in control will mirror the person he's talking to.
See, and there's the difference between the old school policing, what they learned, and the new stuff. I don't think the old cats were learning that kind of stuff. This is new stuff.
Was more dominating. Was more.
Listen to me. I'm in charge.
You're gonna win. You're gonna win no matter what.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. But that whole thing, I should look that up. I can't remember what the heck it was called, but the technique was called verbal judo, and it was so widespread. Yes, when you watch Cops, just about every cop is using those techniques across the whole country. Yeah.
Very effective. It didn't matter if they were in Las Vegas or in some hillbilly country.
Yeah. The only thing that changed was the accent, but the methodology was the same.
I remember we joked about it. It was always a skinny white guy in a white singlet shirt every time.
Chris Rock, the comedian, he said, "Thank God for Cops, because you see that it's not always black people who are in trouble."
Exactly. No doubt.
So, no, that's a great show. I think that's been on for like 30 seasons now. 30.
It's Cops and the Simpsons.
You know what? I was a diehard Simpson fan, and I say was because I think the writing for the last 5 years or so has been terrible. But Family Guy.
Yeah.
If you ask me, Family Guy blows The Simpsons away.
Well, I would agree. My wife hates my wife hates it, but I love it. Maybe it's a guy thing.
Well, maybe it is a guy thing, but yeah, I don't know. I was going to make fun of my wife yet again, but she's just weird. Some of the stuff, I'm like, come on, isn't that funny? And she just, straight face. She won't laugh. She doesn't get it. The thing about Family Guy is the politically incorrect humor all the way. He jokes about everything. It's genius writing.
It's okay because it's him. Yeah, it is. He never steps over one. You would think there are lines that he crosses, but subconsciously, he's not for some reason.
He puts it forward, and I kind of use this as, I don't know if you knew this, but I also do stand-up comedy, and that's one thing that I do. I'll joke about anything on stage, but it has to be presented in an intelligent way. Mm-hmm. Otherwise, you're just being mean.
Right.
And the writing in Family Guy is very intelligent. The subject matter is very volatile. It could be mean if it's presented in a less intelligent way, but it's smart writing.
Yep, it is. And that's actually, I think also that I love these things because I'm a police officer, because it's an escape from my politically correct world. My everyday life is about not being controversial. Now, after being in this job, I'm also more of a public person in the local media. So that's one of the things that I.
But there's a certain amount of responsibility that comes with that. Absolutely.
Yeah. I can't go out in the city anymore. I can't drink out in my local town. And I wouldn't, because I have a face.
I like that. That's a level of professionalism that I appreciate. I like seeing people that have that kind of attitude about it.
Right, and I can choose seeing it as a negative thing, but I mean, I'm old enough now that it's things I don't need. But I do need the politically incorrect humor to myself in my basement now and then, just to
couple episodes of Family Guy. Episodes of Family Guy, and I'll come up to you, Vic, sometime and do some stand-up comedy, and
that would be awesome.
Man, we got
to do some Family Guy episodes on my big TV screen later.
Yeah, no, I love that show.
Yeah. Do you have time to discuss a little bit the investigative techniques that you?
Sure. We can talk for up to another hour if you want. I'm thinking it'll be about an hour before my wife comes in here and grabs me by the throat. So
yeah, right. Domestic violence.
Domestic violence. Then we'll see what kind of police officer you are if you witness that. What will you do? Right.
Yeah. Well, maybe I'll just a bit.
I see nothing.
I see nothing. No, but I spent some time thinking about this since you called me last night, and because right now I'm in a new job where I'm learning a lot, and I've just done some etterutdanning, some
further education,
some further education. And I've been extremely fascinated about what I mentioned before about the development in techniques and the development in almost morally how we look at investigating criminal cases in Norway. And I'm very interested in hearing maybe you don't know this. How long have you been in Norway? You said
since 2002.
Yeah, right. So you're probably, I don't know how many colleagues you're still in touch with in America.
You know what? I could have a whole other podcast episode on that. If we have time, I can tell you why I moved to Norway, but it was I'll just say it was a traumatic thing to have to move here, quit that job and move here. I can tell you about that later, but in that whole process, I found it so difficult. It hurt to keep contact with my old colleagues and not be able to be in I was really attached to that job. So I cut off contact with them. However, just a couple of weeks ago, I got someone from those old days who now works for the U.S. Marshals. I worked with him at the police department there in Chicago, and now he works for the U.S. Marshals. And he got in touch with me out of the blue, and it was the best thing that has happened to me in years.
Wow,
So
I'm glad.
I think that has kind of stimulated me to want to go back and get in touch with those old colleagues. So I am going to do that.
I think you should. I think you should.
Yeah, I have to.
And I've always, always is again false, but since I became a cop, I've had this notion, I've had this small dream that I'm pretty sure I'm going to complete one day. And that is taking leave of absence from my job here in Norway.
Yeah.
After making some sort of arrangement to work in America.
Yeah.
Not work, but tag along and
do some ride-alongs and be kind of like an apprentice type of situation. Yeah.
Yeah. And as for now, my main interest is the investigation techniques, and I would like to expand my horizon and see how people think, what kind of methods they use, and I'm a big fan of. I'm not a big fan, obviously, because I can't remember the title now. The best cop show that has ever been made, 10 seasons. Help me out here.
Shield. The Shield.
No, The Shield. I've seen that as well.
Okay,
but I was not thinking about that. Where the guy says she.
Oh yeah. I know. Come on, Baltimore.
Baltimore, right?
The Wire. Thank you.
The Wire.
Obviously. Yes.
And that's such a. That made me really interested in.
That shows how long-term planning leads to the big results.
Exactly.
You can snatch up these little corner guys that have maybe $100 worth of cocaine on them, or you can wait and play the long game.
Yep.
And get $100,000 or $1 million. And work your way
patience and planning, and it also gets the political. And I've read about the show, and it's supposed to be very much real life.
Yeah, they had a lot of real police as consultants to get things right. Yeah,
right.
Yeah,
but it's
fantastic show.
Yeah, very. And I've seen it a couple of times, and I'm probably going to see it again. But the techniques that have changed here in Norway, and I learned this in my later education now, is that if you go back just 10 or 15 years, we were a much more confessed-based investigative police force.
Yes.
So it was all about getting the confession. You had a suspect, and as long as you got the confession, then you're good.
Yeah.
Then the case is closed. And then go back 15 years, and you started getting all these cases that came up again, and it proved they were false confessions, or it proved the police had done their work not good enough, and people were wrongly convicted.
A couple of high-profile murder cases, if I remember correctly. Yeah.
And you were here for them.
Yeah.
So you would have read about these, and that accelerated what actually happened with police in Norway, which resulted in the transition from the police academy to the college, and it is, and that is what I'm a part of now. I'm a part of the development of these techniques and the process of being pretty new at them in Norway, where we're not searching for guilt, we're searching for innocence. Yeah, which is a radically different way of thinking, where you. That's
very different.
Yeah. So it's deductive thinking. You have evidence that, or you look for the evidence to prove your theory wrong. It's science, basically.
Yeah.
So you have several theories about why something happens, who did it, or how did it happen, and you use systematic working techniques to try to prove your theory is wrong. And the one theory you cannot prove wrong is the one that you have proven to be correct. And that reverse way of thinking is our new way of thinking, and it's preventive to these false convictions and these false results that we cannot live with.
I can see where that would bring about a more factual result.
Yep, but it also brings about more hard work, more extensive, more detailed work, and
Well, what are you seeing? What are you seeing in the statistics? Are more people who are, you're arresting people, and are more of them walking out with no conviction than before?
No, not at all.
Okay.
I mean,
so that proves it's effective then. This new method.
I think so, and we will in a few years see. Well, the more important thing is, and this is the moral subject, you would rather have 10 guilty people walk free than one innocent go to jail, right? Yeah. That's debatable, maybe, but I think it's right. And what you will see in a few years is that you have less guilty people, no innocent people going to jail.
Yes. And of course, that's a good thing. That should be, yeah.
Yeah. That should be more important than putting more and more people or punishing more and more people for what they actually did. I mean, it as I said, it's an ethical discussion, but I think we reached the right conclusion. But it is more demanding. One homicide case here demands a lot more resources than it did 15 years ago. Yeah. At least after the initial phase of the investigation.
I see.
Yeah, and that's probably one of the reasons that that things cost more money. The politicians doesn't see this, and it's getting expensive to run a police district doing all the right things.
See, it's hard for me to thinking about this change in the way you guys would work a case. Trying to prove the innocence rather than the guilt. Mm-hmm. I like the way that sounds. I can't really speak to that as far as comparing to how things are done in the States, because I've been gone. I've been not an officer for so long. I don't know how they're doing things these days. Right. But I, if I can try and roll my mind back to when I was an officer, I don't want to say we worked like that all the time. I think it would depend on what kind of a case. What are the facts? What are the facts that we have in front of us? Sure. But when you say that, when you put words on that method of investigation, it doesn't sound foreign to me. So I would imagine that I had some cases up through the years that I worked in that fashion.
Right, and it is basically. So what you're doing is you're being the devil's advocate.
Yes,
all the time,
exactly.
Right?
Exactly.
You have to prepare the case for a court.
Well, I think
you have to anticipate. Yeah.
No, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Yeah. Where you have to anticipate the ways that a defense lawyer will crush your case.
Exactly.
So you have to eliminate all of those. You have to think like the defensive lawyer.
Exactly. That's
not what he called.
Yeah. That's exactly what I was going to say. Is that almost regardless of what kind of a case it is, what kind of a crime has been committed, I would think, at least the way I worked, that process of investigation, it entails being the devil's advocate. You have to prepare your case. We can't take a crappy case to the district attorney. We have to, or to the state's attorney rather. We have to make sure that we are closing all of the holes, that we are opening holes, opening up things in the case and looking at it from, so to speak, in quotes, the other side. How will the other side of this case look at it? That's to me, that's what a good investigator would do. It just seems that you guys have made an actual policy of that, whereas or policy. Well, it's the way you're being taught.
It's the way we're being taught now, and it's very new. Yeah, and this also comes as a direct consequence of. Much more psychology and basically psychology being thrown into our education system and our further educations after we're done, because this comes as a result of analyzing what went wrong in the cases that actually went wrong. Right? What were the mechanisms in
Exactly.
the police culture, in the police way of thinking, in the investigative methods. Where were the errors, and why did they show up?
Yeah.
And it's pretty simple, but it's a hard psychological thing to. You have to force your mind to not fall into these traps, which is one of the things we do the most as humans is simplify things.
Yeah.
And the other things we do most is rely on the first things that are presented to us. So the first thing that you see, the first evidence you pick up, well, if you don't concentrate, if you don't use the right methods, that's the evidence that will lead you towards a goal. That's the evidence that will make your head theory.
Yeah.
And the one time that theory is completely wrong, that's where the error happens. If you let that first impression guide your way, that's that we call that well, I don't know what you call that in English. I have a Norwegian word for it.
Try me in Norwegian. Maybe I can translate it.
Well, do you see this poster I have back here?
Yes.
Yeah, you can't read it because it's too far away.
Yeah,
but
it's a little blurry.
Yeah, it's a lot of colors and it's a lot of words, and it's all of the things that I've learned about this investigation technique that I've colored and I've written down in one poster so that I remember these things.
Yeah.
But it's called a trap of decisions, en beslutningsfelle. Decision trap.
Yeah, that you fall into a certain pattern that can lead you away from what the truth should be. You're assuming maybe what the truth is, or you're assuming the path towards the truth.
Based on your first
impression, based on your previous experiences and whatnot. Yeah. See, now that's something you've put into words something that I applied. Because I have to say this, there's no real during my time there was no real training to be a detective, to be an investigator. You just proved yourself on the street as a uniformed cop, and then you got promoted.
Right.
And then you just started applying that knowledge that you have. Of course, with the guy, I think we were like 5 or 6 detectives, and we helped each other, and I learned from those guys. What a great bunch of guys I worked with.
Wow.
So that was our school, you know.
Right.
Whereas there is a benefit to you guys having more of a university approach to your police academy, in that you learn these psychological methods and philosophies at school. We learned it on the street and just applied it as we learned it. I don't know which way is better. I don't know which way is more effective. I think if you and I were to sit together and extend this podcast to a day-long conversation, I'm sure I could learn a ton of stuff from you, but I also bet I could teach.
And vice versa.
Exactly. I think it would be wrong to say which way is better and which way is worse, but
I have a thought about what's better with your method or with your system that makes it better, because I totally believe I didn't know anything about homicide investigation until I had my first homicide case a few months ago. Obviously, I've read the books, I've learned I've read about the techniques, but you have to. The street term is always going to win. You know, the guys with the experience had to help me. The guys from the old school, they had to mentor me, even though I was the one coming in with the book information, right?
Yeah.
But the big difference that I'm imagining is still. Because you said it a couple of times. You said that being an investigator is a step up in America, right? That's a promotion.
Absolutely.
Everybody, a patrol officer is lower. I'm guessing on the pay grade and on the stars on the shoulder and everything. An investigator is better, right?
Not necessarily pay-wise, because seniority, time on the job means a whole lot, or it did back then in the States. Okay. So you could, when I first became a detective, there were several patrolmen who made more money than me on their flat salary. But then, because of how much I worked, good Lord, I made a lot of money because I was working. Right. We worked these cases until they were done. There were some nights where we slept on the floor under our desk. So,
and that's and that method of working and that culture that you have in the States when it comes to detective work. We do not have that here. It's rigid. It's our work times are rigid. Our overtime budgets are rigid, and it's always, even though the cases are big. I mean, when the serious things happen here, a murder is relatively rare here, obviously. So when a murder happens, even the bosses say, "Okay, just work, but not too much. You can't sleep on the under your desk. You won't be. You're not allowed to come back to work."
Yeah, well, you guys have so many labor laws as well that are in place to protect the workers.
Yeah, and of course it's positive, but I mean.
We worked, if we were in a case, our boss expected us to just give him a call. If he wasn't at work, if he was off that day or that night, just give him a call and let him know what's going on, and then we would just keep working. Right.
And there's also the cultural element in itself with, and that's what I mean by the detective work being something that you strive for.
Yes. Yeah.
It has not been like that in Norway for many years, and one of the main reasons is you don't get an extra pay grade to be a detective. You don't need extra education because everything is given to you in college, right? So I was actually a detective the first day after I went out from school. That was my first job, But when you work on the street here, you have the turnus, you have the shifts, right? So you work so you work nights and days and evenings, and that's basically where you get your payments.
Wow.
That's what. So you make a lot more money with, in my opinion, less responsibility.
I see.
So I think that we are going. They have something that's called the etterforskningsløft, the investigation lift, which is an outspoken goal again to try to lift the art of investigating. But what they are missing, because they are giving us all this education, but what they are missing is the opportunity to actually make more money, go up in grades, and for it to be a job you want, for it to be
worth
something.
It,
for something you strive for.
Yeah.
And we do not have the culture that yours. It's a romantic thing for me to hear you speak about how you work the cases.
I see.
I'm lucky now because I only have the big cases, which means I almost get to work the way you do all the time. But most of the people around me here, they work with the very important cases. Don't misunderstand me, because all the cases are important to the public, you know.
Sure.
But for a police officer, the thrill of working a big case, the thrill of being able to dive into an investigation to look for the solution. I see too much paper trail here. Too much just getting the cases out of the way to be able to get new ones in. So I miss that. I want that.
Well, I tell you, as you say, it sounds almost almost romantic, almost like a Hollywood fantasy. Well, it was also like that for me as I was going through it.
Right.
It was so exciting. Even when it wasn't exciting, it was exciting.
Right.
Just knowing that anything could happen at any time, and then to I was a crime scene investigator.
Wow.
Fingerprints and blood traces and all that crazy stuff. Some homicide investigations, gangs, drugs. It was a lot of fun. I mean, there's a lot of heartache in there. There's a lot of challenges, moral challenges, personal challenges. But my gosh, was it something to learn from? And it was fun. And you had status. I felt like, I'm doing something important, and it was recognized by my colleagues and by my friends and by my family as something important and vital.
And you always worked with other people, I guess.
Yeah, I had, for the most part, I had one partner, wonderful guy. I learned a lot from him. I can remember the first big investigation we had together. We had a few, but the first one that we had together, and I was just like his assistant, and I just got to watch him and learn from him, and he explained things, and I could sit in on the interrogation. And when he got tired, he'd go out, I'd go in, and then he'd critique me afterwards. So it was a constant learning process. It was a constant challenge, and just, to go from being this country boy from Ohio to that kind of a life, it just wow. Well, I tell you, I am a blessed man. I've had an exciting life. Those police years are only part of it. I have had such an exciting life, but I think the time in my life where I grew the most is probably those police years. Yeah, I would imagine.
Yeah. I would imagine.
Yeah,
and that's why I pointed out, when I pointed out that you work with other people, I think that's also, and you talked about status. I think too many detectives in Norway sit by themselves alone working cases.
We were, and I almost get emotional when I start talking about it. We were, I think we were 6 detectives. That fluctuated up or down 1 or 2 from time to time, but we were 6 guys. And when we had some downtime, when nothing really much was going on, we were there and that would be like our informal debrief. If we were stressed out because I don't know. I don't know how to put words on that, but we would just sit down and talk shit and laugh and make fun of each other.
Of course.
And then when the work came, we had one detective who worked by himself, but other than that, we were always paired up in twos. So you always had that partner there.
Where you can bounce off of.
Where you can bounce ideas off of. They can set you on the right path if you're starting to get a little bit distracted. They protect you so many times with, like I said, my last day on the job, we caught a guy and he was armed after sticking up a grocery store. Right. And your partner's there, they got your back, they're protecting you. And it's, yeah, I mean, it's beautiful. And that is,
like you get emotional.
Yeah. It was a beautiful, beautiful learning phase in my life. And I wish that that detectives in Norway could experience that. And it would be so simple as to just demand that there is a team of investigators and they work together. This idea of one detective sitting at his desk, in the small hours of the morning or the night, that shouldn't be happening. There should always be a team.
Exactly.
Always.
And there's a development here, and I want to be part of that. And that's and the things that you are talking about there is even making it even more inspirational for me to try to.
It's important.
To try to guide the police station in that direction, because the problem is that we don't have enough guys for it. Basically, we have about 450 cases here at any time, divided over a handful of detectives.
Good
literally.
Lord. See, and that goes back to that whole phenomenon of having educated officers coming out of the police academy, and there's no job for them. That just blows my mind.
Yeah, when they are so needed. So that's.
But see, if the detective aspect, if that environment could be restructured so that it gains more status within the police, more pay, and it's structured in a way that is more of a team effort.
Yep.
I think it would change not only the police environment, but it would change the society as well, because a lot of citizens are jaded. A lot of citizens, we talked about it. They're not going to call the police because they know they're not going to come, and that's not just in the way out in the districts. Here in the city, there's people who might get their home broken into and they'll never call the police because they know that case is going to sit there. And all respect to you guys are doing the best you can, but you're not enough people. So cases sit and sit and sit.
Oh, they sit for a long. And that was actually also a question that I had for you. Were you enough guys? Did you have, because is it like you see in the movies that you get one case and you and your partner work until that case is done, and only when that case is done you get presented with a new case, because that would be a wonderful way of working.
Well, yes and
or
no.
Or a couple of 3-4 cases.
Yes, a couple 3 or 4. We were enough to where it would be, then we could prioritize. If there's a burglary where maybe only $100 worth of merchandise was stolen, we could put that to the side a little bit, or maybe hand it off to one of our colleagues who has a little bit less to do. But for the most part, when a big case came up, we dropped what we were doing. I can give you an example. We would take turns being on call. Now, this was back before we had cell phones, but they were cheap. So we had pagers. So the on-call pager would get passed around. So, the pager goes off in the middle of the night, 2 o'clock in the morning. I call into the station and they tell me there's a burglary. So I get up, I go there, I collect all the evidence. I'm the evidence technician. And then I just continue with that case. Do all of the investigating, interviews, interrogations, all that stuff. That's my case. Right. And
that's a very important thing, to own your case, right?
I was just going to say, it gives you a certain level of ownership. It gives you a certain level of pride in the work you're going to do. This isn't a case for the South Holland Police Department. This is my case. This is my reputation.
Yep, you take pride in solving this, and if you don't, or if you do something wrong, it's on you. And we've lost that somewhere along the line in Norway.
We had us, and this is one thing that I don't think has changed over the years with police work. I do believe that when you, especially a new detective, you're a new detective, and because of the way that those detectives own their cases, and it goes very much on their personal work moral and their own personal way of being viewed by their colleagues, there's a certain beauty in that. There's a certain romanticism that's firmly planted in reality with that.
And the result of it is also better quality, probably.
Yeah, absolutely. And the public sees that.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, there will be cases of, whatever kinds of cases that happen here in Norway, and then they sit for so long before a single suspect gets interrogated by the police. And I've always wondered, how in the world does that make the investigator feel?
Yeah,
that he or she is interviewing someone who supposedly did some sort of crime, 18 months ago.
Right.
I would imagine,
it's embarrassing almost.
Well, embarrassing and not very motivating.
Right. Exactly.
It's a totally different feeling from that investigator's point of view if a husband beat his wife 2 hours ago. And you're in that case right now talking to the victim and the offender or the suspect, and you're trying to get to the bottom of it. That is a totally different feeling. It also gives the victim a totally different experience.
Very important point.
If a woman, for example, a woman has been beaten by her husband, and when those police come within 5, 10, 15 minutes and they take the husband away for questioning, and she's getting taken care of and she's being referred to psychological help if she needs it, that's going to have a completely different effect for that woman and for the entire family. Let's think about if there's children in that home, So it just... I don't know. It does something for the police department, but also something for the society. Just to say it shortly, yeah. Obviously. So fortunately, we were able to work in that way, and there was a certain level of excitement that I always felt. Here's a case that just happened. The clock is ticking.
Yep.
How am I going to get to the bottom of this?
Yeah.
And that was, I cannot I have not been able to replace that feeling since then.
And I don't think you will.
Probably. No, I can't. So it's
you can find other things, but you won't replace that exact feeling. And this is what I tried to say before, that too many detectives have that job where they, when they're done with one case that took too long, they have to take the next case, and it's 2 months old, and you call the suspect and you call the victim, and they've almost forgotten about their own case, right? And it's not that important to them anymore. And the word motivation is is crucial here.
Yeah, we are human. Within that humanity, there has to be a certain level of professionalism. You're going to do the best you can, but
Of course.
but you can do the best you can, but also not be very motivated.
Yep.
Do you understand?
Yep.
And that is going to bring about a different way of tackling that case. So the motivation is crucial. Motivation is crucial. So put a little bit more status in that investigator role in Norway.
Mm-hmm.
Put a little more pay, more money into it, and put a little more structure. Make it some sort of unit, the investigative unit. There's something important about that sense of belonging to something special, because it is something special. And I'm not trying to say that the patrol cops are less than. I'm not saying that.
They have their own experiences that they can't replace with anything, right?
Yeah, exactly. So, police work. I love it.
You can talk about it forever, and I'm hoping and I'm thinking that the plans for this are there. They speak highly of it. I just fear that it's going to be a while before we're there, and that's political, because all we need is money. But everybody can say that, right? But you would think that the police and hospitals, which basically are the ones in society that gets that should get the most, get the least. That's my
but again, you, as I said before, you're in a good position to influence that. I'm sure you're doing good work. I'm sure you're doing influential things, and with you being as young as you are, you're going to carry all of that experience further. And as you, the longer you're there and the more experience you get, the more respect you'll get, the more you'll be heard, and the bigger influence you'll have. So I can see you doing great things.
I hope so. Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. No, and I mean that. I mean, it is, you are in a very special position right now. You're in this is a pivotal point in police work in Norway.
Yep.
It can either
that's exactly what it is.
Yeah, it can either stay the same, and I believe that by staying the same, it's actually going to get worse, because the criminal dynamic is changing. So if police work stays the same, it will, in essence, become worse, or it can get better because of new thinking, like you have.
Yep, and what you said there is also obviously important, which makes it a little hard and more understandable that this will cost a lot of money, because crime is changing. We are parallel to this. We are living in a time where I experienced this a whole lot working with kids from 2012 to 2018. Because what happened in that exact period? Well, every kid on the planet got a cell phone, and internet made the world smaller. And I usually say this to parents when I talk to them: what is the most important thing right now? Well, be restrictive with giving your kids a phone. Because we have literally thousands of cases every year, just here, thousands of cases that would never happen if kids didn't own a phone. And that's just an example about how fast we could translate this into more advanced crime, and which takes more out of a police district, much more than before.
Yeah, I would imagine, and that's we have technology, but I would still say that those type of crimes can be very difficult to follow up and get to the bottom of. Yes. Cybercrime and these things that kids are experiencing on their cell phones is not the easiest thing to trace.
No, and we
have our method. You have your method. I keep saying we. You have your method.
Oh, it is we.
Let me say we have our methods, but it's still not an easy thing to get to the bottom of. And I think it's pretty rampant. I think a lot of kids, unfortunately, are exposed to a lot of things that they don't need to be if the parents would just be tougher.
Yep, and be more present. And how are you present? And how can you be present in your child's digital life? You almost certainly cannot be if you give them a cell phone. So, yeah. I'm
just getting some water from my lovely wife.
Wow.
Hiding from you because she's ashamed.
I'm
the ugliest one in the house, so she shouldn't be ashamed. See, he's looking at me, all right. See? Huh? Show your face. Boom shika. She's the best. She's the best.
Wow. I'm happy for you.
Thank you. I have a good life here in Norway. It's not home. I'm homesick all the time. But this is good. I am enjoying myself here.
Are you traveling back rapidly?
You know what? We just canceled our trip today because we were supposed to travel, I believe it was the 22nd of June, to go back home to Ohio.
Just a little bit too early, probably.
Yeah, and if we did it, then our insurance wouldn't cover it because of the travel restrictions, and it's just too risky. And
right.
Everybody has been healthy here in the house so far, and we're trying to keep it that way. Tomorrow actually is going to be my first day going back to the gym. I compete in powerlifting.
I'll be honest, I saw.
Oh yeah, it's not just air under here. There's
and also I saw it on your Facebook page.
Okay, yeah. So tomorrow will be the first day going back to the gym, but we have all kinds of well thought out restrictions that are put in place. They have separated the powerlifting platforms, and you have to schedule going in. So that there's only a certain amount. I don't remember what that is, but I go so early. I'll be there by myself. Actually,
this is actually interesting. Is this an official gym in Drammen?
It's not an official gym. This is in under the influence of the powerlifting club, Drammen Styrkeidrettslag.
Oh, okay.
So there's different rules for that than there are for the regular gyms. If you are part of an organized athletic organization, then there's certain rules.
Right.
So they've put in place all of these rules, and it's very restrictive. You have to schedule when you're going to go so that it's not crowded with people. So I scheduled myself to go at 8 a.m. I like training early anyway, so I'll be the only one there. So that's
even though it doesn't feel like it, that's when you have the most energy.
Well, I've always I can go back to when I was a kid in my my entire childhood, from the time I was 7 years old, playing American football. And that whole thing with getting up to train in the summertime, get up at like 4:30 in the morning.
Wow.
And go to the high school, and we would start having our 2-a-day training sessions in the summer before school started up. So ever since then, I love training early. I've had periods, even as an adult, where I would, get a special key at the gym and go there and train, 4, 5, 6 in the morning before work. That's my time. That's my time to train. Yeah.
Right. And it's a wonderful hobby. I also do not powerlifting, but my passion is always also weightlifting. And in these Corona times, man, what am I going to do? It's been since March 12th now, and the body weight exercises are not the same.
That's what I've been doing. I've actually taken a break from that the last week and a half or so, but all during this Corona time, I've been doing body weight exercises in my garage.
Yeah.
But here in not too long, in a couple of weeks, I'll be getting my own equipment, and I'll have pretty much a full powerlifting gym in my garage.
In your garage. Yeah. Wow, that's a dream come true.
Well, and thank God for that kind woman I have who let me spend the money on that.
and she's parking her car outside of the garage as well.
No, we're lucky. We have a what do you call that? Our driveway actually has our bedroom actually is above our driveway, so it's like a long covered. So we don't really need our garage for the car, so it's perfect.
Oh, right.
It's perfect.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
We got a good situation. I tell you, I don't like living in the city. When we lived in the Chicago area, I hated it. I'm raised in suburban, rural Ohio. So I don't like living in the city. I don't like Drammen as a city.
Right.
But if I have to live in a city, I like that it's Drammen, because as far as cities, we do have space in this area where we are. And that's important to me. I can't have that thing where I open my window and the neighbor is watching me change my underwear. I need. It's probably more traumatic for the neighbor than me. But
no, I'm the same. We also live out in the woods, and I love it. It's to have be woken up by the birds instead of.
There you go.
Yeah. So.
But we still have our farm up on Sæland, up in Finnmark. We still have that.
Oh, you still own a farm up there?
Yeah. So that's where my wife's father grew up. It's right on the island there, right on the coast. Our front yard is the ocean. So that's our summer place. We're going to try and get up there this summer. We can't go home to Ohio, so we're going to go home to Sealand.
And you're going to be able to go there. Norwegian vacation is the way to go now, I guess. And I'll go abroad in 2021.
I've always been the kind of person that, if we're not traveling home to the States, then I have plenty of fun doing a summer vacation here in Norway. There's just so much to see. And even if I don't want to see anything new, we have our place up north on Sealand, and that's good enough for me. It's beautiful.
Well, you're going to see the whole of Norway driving up there. So.
I've done that several times, actually.
Yeah, right.
That was my first experience when I came here. I came here the 5th of June, 2002. We slept one night at her parents' house, 2 nights at her parents' house, and then we got in the car and drove from Hurum up to Sealand. So that was my first impression of Norway, was that drive going up there, and just
you got to see the whole thing.
got to see the whole thing. And then when we came back south, we drove through Sweden.
Right.
So I got to see that. And it was just not
as good.
No, not as good. And actually, it's more difficult to drive through Sweden because that road, the main road going through Sweden, especially from Östersjön and up over, is just totally dead. There's nothing there. And you get tired and it's monotonous. And then all of a sudden, here come 100 reindeer. And it's dangerous. It's just
it is.
Not safe. Not safe at all.
Sleeping and driving half the time.
No, so I got a very good impression of Norway right from the beginning. And then when we came back south from Finnmark, we went out west to Bergen.
So you've lived there?
Bergen.
Yeah, so you've lived there?
No. We drove out there.
Just drove there.
Just drove out there just to check it out, and then up to I don't think we went to Ålesund, but we were in the area out. Yeah, so I've seen pretty much all the places there are to see in Norway.
Wow.
So
it's a beautiful country.
Yeah, I tell you, it still fascinates me that I live here. I've been here
one day I'll try Ohio and Chicago because I've never been.
Well, I recommend Ohio.
You recommend Ohio, yeah.
No, I can't say anything bad about Chicago. Downtown Chicago is a great tourist spot. There's a lot to see there. Oh, absolutely. It's safe, and it's a good tourist spot. Safe during the day. Right. But to live there, it was never my thing. It really wasn't. I felt more at home when we moved here to Norway, to tell the truth.
Wow,
Norway,
that's nice.
Rural Norway is similar to what I grew up in Ohio. So
right. So you have had wooden houses in Ohio, I guess. Wooden
houses, no shoes, no polar bears in the street.
No polar bears in the street. Did you? So you were in Chicago, because I'm watching this Netflix series right now that everyone is watching about the Michael Jordan era.
I haven't seen that yet. I have not seen that yet.
But were you in Chicago when that was in the 90s? Yeah, right. Yeah. So were you ever? Did you see him live ever?
No, I never did. When I say I was working a lot, I was working a lot.
You were working a lot. Oh, okay.
Yeah, a lot. So I never got to make it to a Bulls game. Never got to make it up there.
All right.
I did. I think I can say this without saying the guy's name. Hold on a second. Okay, that's just my SD card in my mixer telling me I have 15 minutes left before the card is full.
We've spoken for 2.5 hours.
Wow, 2 hours and 12 minutes.
Okay, yeah.
What was I going to say? I did have to put handcuffs on a professional basketball player.
Oh, really?
And we talked earlier about you have to have the verbal skills.
Yeah.
Now, you've seen my Facebook. I'm a big, strong guy.
Yeah.
I always have been. Yeah. But this guy, when people think of professional basketball players, they think they're these tall, skinny, but these guys they're tall, but they're not skinny. They're lean. They're hard as a rock, full of muscle.
Right.
And this guy, it was a domestic violence situation. He was all on his wife. So when we came, he was still kind of, excited and aggressive.
Oh, yeah.
So I had to talk this guy down.
Right.
And I did. And I'm so glad I did. I have never stood next to someone as big as this guy. I'm talking both in height and width. His wrist was at least twice the thickness of a regular wrist. Wow. I remember putting the handcuff on him, and I could only click it once. I had it on the first click. And then I had to chain together 2 more pairs. So he had 3 pairs of handcuffs.
Oh my God. That's a big guy.
And luckily we talked him down and he was calm. I will never forget that.
That's some verbal judo right
That's there. Some verbal judo right there. I remember telling him, and this is kind of that ugly humor that police officers have. But I remember telling the guy, you just got done kicking your wife's ass. You've got all of that out of you now. There's no reason to be aggressive anymore. And he's like, oh, yeah, you're right. Yeah, you're right. We just kind of slowly talked him down. So,
that's a very good sentence. That's a very good approach. And we didn't get to talk too much about that, and we don't have time to talk a lot about it either. But I wanted to mention how important as well. I think the morbid humor is extremely important in our profession.
I think it's very important. I think it's very important in life. It got me through a lot of that time as a police officer. Got me through a lot of my time in the Marines as well. That dark humor where you can laugh at something that is actually traumatic and sad.
It simply takes the pain away.
It does. Yeah. Well, I can give you an example in my current life. I lost my son to a heroin overdose in November, the 5th of November, 2019. He died from a heroin.
2019.
2019. Yeah.
No, I'm sorry.
His birthday was just yesterday. Actually, he would have been 25 yesterday.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Thank you. It's very sad. But in my stand-up comedy routine, I actually put some things in there and put some humor on it. I have to, because I don't.
How can you not?
How can a parent be prepared to deal with something like that? And I'm just lucky that I have the platform to put some humor on it and actually, work with that and get it out. That's actually part of my stand-up routine. And a couple of times when I've been trying to get that bit out, during my routine, I'm almost in tears, even as I'm saying the joke. It has an interesting effect on the crowd. So, but it's real, and as long as it's real, it's therapeutic for me. I have to do that. I don't know how else to deal with it.
Yeah, because you can talk a lot about nourishing pain. Right?
Yes,
you can
absolutely.
talk a lot about nourishing pain, and
it's a real thing. Yeah.
Yeah, and I obviously have nothing that compares with your experience, and I hope I never will. But in our profession, seeing that much pain with people, I've talked to so many people who've had similar experiences and in the profession, and it does something to you. And coming back with a colleague, not always having to have that serious mind, not always having to have that that way of talking about it, and just being.
Well, that dark humor that dark humor is therapeutic.
It's a lifesaver.
Oh, absolutely. I don't think, there used to be this image. I don't know how real this is in today's police force, but there used to be this image of the hard, tough cop. He never cries. There's no emotion. I think that if you are that kind of a cop, there's something wrong.
Yeah.
If you don't have feelings in this, if you don't have some emotion in this, if you're not affected by this job, there's something wrong. There's something wrong.
You need both empathy and humor and communicative skills. It's not just a simple job, and that's what makes it. That's what makes it so interesting, and that's why we could probably talk about it for 4 more hours.
Oh gosh,
if we had the opportunity.
Well, if I invite you to, or when I invite you to come back, would you come back?
Thanks. Yeah, obviously. We haven't spoken about everything that we can.
Yeah, we have a lot more to talk about.
We do.
Well, my SD card is telling me I have 9 minutes left, but
so we should start wrapping it up then.
But you had said that you would like to do a ride along in the States. Have you taken any steps towards making that happen?
No, not yet.
No, it's just something you want to do when the time is right.
When the time is right, and when I say ride along, I'm actually more keen on experiencing the thing you just talked about the investigating, and the process of investigating, getting a new case, seeing how you seeing how you tackle a new case, and how you investigate. So maybe being also being part of a ride along, obviously, but
actually being kind of glued to the shoulder of a detective as he goes through his casework. I tell you, just about any department in the States would be open for something like that.
Even from a Norwegian.
Oh, absolutely, especially. I think, but I think especially because you're from another country. I know there's a lot of interdepartmental cooperation among the different departments and different jurisdictions in the States.
Right.
And they're open to that. So if you were to come from another country, that would just be exciting to them. It would be a chance for them to share, learn something from you at the same time as they teach something.
Right. And there is an international police who I don't know what to call it. There is a club.
Yes,
that's not what it's called, but there is an international forum.
There is.
Of some sort, which I'm a member of. I just haven't made an active step towards contacting everyone in
so
the
this
States
would be
yet.
something probably then that the Norwegian police would help to fund. You wouldn't have to pay for all this yourself to get there and housing and whatnot.
I guess it depends on the format. Yeah,
but exactly. If you were to kind of put it forward in such a way that's beneficial, mutually beneficial, I would imagine there would be some sort of funding that you could get.
Yeah, probably. Especially if I came back with some sort of report, some sort of learning, some sort of maybe wrote an article in the because we have some police papers or whatever you want to call it.
Yeah.
Could write an experience article or something. Yeah, so I'm thinking it's obviously possible, and I just need the right amount of experience. Need to be ready. My kids need to be a little bigger, and when the time is right, I'm thinking a month or maybe 2.
That would be nice. I'm sure you would enjoy that. You would enjoy that.
Oh, that would be living, and maybe just maybe we could. And this is me joking, but I'm actually serious. We need to change these into metal badges.
Thank you. I agree.
Yeah.
There's something that's not quite police about
exactly.
That. For those who are not, for those who are just listening, he showed me the Norwegians. They don't have a badge, so to speak. It's like an ID card that's in a plastic cover case that they wear in a chain around the neck. It's I guess I've just gotten used to seeing that, but it is kind of weird, actually, now that I think about it.
Yeah. In my inner pocket, I should have a badge so that I can say, John
flip it out and
homicide.
Well, hey, listen, I truly enjoyed this, and the only reason I'm stopping is because my memory card is about to run out.
Well, I loved it as well. Likewise, it was wonderful. The time went on fast. Wow.
Yeah, it did. I mean, this was, like I said, I've really been looking forward to this. So I'm grateful that you took the time to talk to me. I'm flattered.
It's my pleasure. It's my pleasure. I'm flattered. It's my pleasure.
So everybody, that is John Eivind Melbye, a cop in Norway. Thanks, John Eivind.
Thanks. Bye.
Bye, everybody.
I'm coming home. I'm coming home. Yes, I am. Yes, I'm coming home. I'm coming home. Yes, I am, my Lord. Oh, my Lord. Lord, I'm coming home.